Guys, it is early January and there's still a lot of citrus on the trees, so today's video is going to be on the varieties that are growing in the garden, and our brothers here in town, we're going to do a little bit of a taste testing. So come on in, let me show you this first one. This is a Chamuti sweet orange, and it was one of the original plantings, so this is probably the second tree ever planted on the property, planted in 2013 in the spring. It is a Valencia type orange, and so what's really cool about this type, or this group of oranges, is that they stay on the tree a long time. So I could pick these all the way up to like May or June of 2021. And so we got one for our tasting. Tree number 2 is an N33 Naval Orange, and this one was planted in 2016. So this one did really well through the hard 2018 freeze, and that's why it's so big. And it made a few fruits last year, and just a few fruits this year. Is still getting its feet under it. All right, the next citrus tree in the garden is a Changshu Kumquat. This is my favorite kumquat. It's also called Fukashu sometimes, so you might find it under that name. This tree was planted in 2014 and has made it through freezes really well. It's tougher than some of the other citrus, kind of like the Satsumas are. And it just recently dumped a ton of fruit on the ground, but there's a few left for us to use in our tasting. So here is our big old Changshu Kumquat. All right, here we have a brown select Satsuma. This tree was planted in 2016, so it's fairly young, but it has grown just gangbusters like crazy. It is a tree that's on that Saxon Becknell rootstock, and that's what really, I think, helped push it to grow quickly. It made a bunch of fruit this year, and most have fallen because Satsumas in general are very early in citrus. They're like October, November kind of citrus, but we do have a few left for the tasting. And here we have a Sito Satsuma, so similar to Brown Select. However, this one is on trifoliate rootstock, and this one is much older. This was planted in 2014 and has really only gotten about this tall. So we still have some fruit on it, and it's a much nicer, more mature, more appropriate Satsuma size. This tree is a Miwa Kumquat. These won't be on the tasting because they're not ripe, but it is loaded with kumquats, and a cool thing about this tree is it's one of the oldest citrus on the property because it was transplanted from a park that was getting cleared for development. Here we have a Kishu Seedless Mandarin. This is an exceptional fruit tree, seedless and sweet. This was planted in the spring of 2015, and most of the fruit has fallen because it is an early mandarin, probably ready around October. This tree is a Louisiana sweet Hamlet, so a sweet orange, and this tree was planted in the spring of 2016. It grew incredibly well, mostly because this area was a major compost dump site. However, it did get hit hard in the freeze of 2018, and that's causing it to have some rootstock regrowth. So you see, if you ever see massive spines and trifoliate leaves coming out at the base of your citrus, it's real important to trim those off. But this will be a good one for bringing over for taste testing. This is my blood orange tree. This tree was a rescue from Levy Park as well, that park that was getting cleared. The fruit is a little bit small this year, and I've never known exactly which type, so maybe somebody in the comments once we cut it open will let me know, but a lot of small fruit this year. This is an Everhart Naval. It was planted in 2016, and it got the most severe damage of all of the trees in the 2018 hard freeze. So your navel oranges are not as cold tolerant as stuff like Satsuma and Kumquat, and it has only made one fruit this year. It made only a few last year as well, so it's not in its full prime productivity yet, but at least we have one for the tasting. Here we have a Sunburst Mandarin, another tree that was a little less cold tolerant, got frozen, and this tree I got just actually from a Lowe's store, so it's a cultivar that was at the big box stores. It wasn't super tasty in my opinion, but it has beautiful bright color to the fruit, so we'll see how it does in the tasting. Here we have a Mars sweet orange that was planted in 2015 in the fall. It got a lot of good winter protection its first 2 years to help it get strong and established. And it's got some beautiful fruit on it ready to eat. Here we have an Ujukitsu sweet lemon. This was planted in the spring of 2014, so one of the earlier plantings. Now this tree only had a handful of fruit. This is the very last one I'm gonna pick for you guys. but the reason was last year it was overproductive. This branch right here was actually the central leader, and it was so heavy with fruit that it bent out and down to the ground. So oftentimes citrus, like Ujukitsu, some of them have to take a year off and have alternate bearing cycles, but this will be a good one for the taste test. This is a Republic of Texas sweet orange. It's grown up here in the shade, so it's grown a little slower. This is a 2014 planting. Now, you'll notice there's some new growth in the top. I tried to bud graft into the central leaders on this some blood oranges last fall, and both of the buds got actually swamped over before I was able to cut them off. So that's why it looks the way it does, but this is one of those sweet oranges like the Hamlet and like the Mars, so it should have a pretty similar taste. Here we have a Murkot honey mandarin. This is a tree that is taking the year off because last year it was super abundant, so a really strong alternate bearing is what it's showing. And this one I planted in 2018 to replace one that was killed. So this honey mandarin was not as cold tolerant as some of the other trees. Froze to the ground, and I just replaced it after the 2018 freeze. This is a Nagel's Seedless Kumquat. So this one was one of the very early plantings, and this is a good example of just growing in the shade. So this was a 2013 tree, been in here forever with these two big oaks right above it. But fortunately, we now have a kumquat to compare with the Changshu. Here is the second Changshu Kumquat that I have. So there's two in the garden because I liked it so much. And this one is growing really tall, again, because of the light here. It was the trees around it that pushed it up, and I think that's really cool. And this area is a bit warmer because of the canopy of the oaks, so it's a little bit of a microclimate that's helped protect it. So we have more Changshu to taste. And here are a few more trees that are unproductive this year. This is a Pixie Mandarin, so that tall, skinny thing will be similar to the Kishu seedless whenever it makes its fruit. Right here, behind that Lucana, is a Bloom Sweet grapefruit that took the year off. It's alternate bearing as well. And so it had a nice heavy year last year and nothing this year. Over here, this is a seedling lemon tree. Grocery store Lisbon lemon has never produced fruit, and mine never will, maybe, we'll see. And then right over here is an Ujukitsu Satsuma Mandarin. So this is a really early Satsuma, and it did have a few fruit this year that have all fallen off. Citrus has an interesting story. So this citrus was purchased in 2013 as a Cara Naval, and that winter, so the winter of 2013-2014, it got frozen down really hard, down basically to the rootstock. And so what came back was going to be a surprise, and what came back is kind of probably the rootstock, but maybe some influences of the parent, a larger fruit, and we'll get to it in the tasting, but it is interesting to say the least. And this is one that I've already grafted a few new things onto, so this will be a multi-graft tree. And then we can just pan right over here to our very last tree. This is another Kishu seedless mandarin. So just, if you had to pick one tree and you really could protect it from the cold, it would probably be the Kishu seedless. It's a really great fruit. And this is the end of the season. So let's get on with the tasting. And here is the spread pre-cut. We have our sweet oranges, and we have our mandarins, and we have the navals and the kumquats, and then we have the random ones.
Hey, this is Casey. I'm Mickey's brother. I just tasted all the fruit he picked. On this plate, the Mars orange was my favorite. And then next, these two were pretty similar. I like the Republic a little bit better. It was a little sweeter. And then the Hamlet one, it was pretty pulpy. It was a little more like a juice orange. It was my least favorite.
Yeah, I think it looks dry, on the inside.
On the Mandarin plate, this Seto one, Seto, that was my favorite. It was super sweet and not acidy at all. But it was the Kishu one was really just as good. Those were both awesome. Then the Brown Select, I like that. This was the Sunburst one. I liked it next, and the Brown Select was the least sweet.
And I have to interject and say that this Brown Select, you can see that it's puffy and not fully filled out. And this is what happens with Satsumas. when they don't get a really heavy fruit set, they end up making really big fruit that by this time of year, because that brown select Satsuma was most ripe back in October, November, so it kind of lost some of its juiciness, and I think that's why it is low. It's actually a really good Satsuma cultivar, so don't write it off because of this one fruit.
This one, the Everheart one, I mean the N33 was my favorite. It was really sweet. And then the Everheart one was more like a soccer practice orange, just, you know, pulpy and a little bit sweet. These are the Kumquats.
Yeah.
They're both awesome. I thought the Nagels one was really fun because it was really tart on the inside and sweet on the outside, but that one was just as good. It's just preference. So I've never tried Ujukitsu before. It's got a little lemoniness to it. That was pretty fun. And then that blood orange is, I mean, it's kind of like candy lifesaver flavor. It's really got a fun flavor to it. And then this one was, it's a lot juicier than it looks. And it just had a little hint of grapefruit flavor, but it wasn't tart at all.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Like, it's just bursting with juice. When I cut it, you know, there's a puddle on the cutting board. And then the blood orange, let me know if you can see that pattern and know which cultivar the blood orange is. But yeah, these were one-offs, and I wrote down Swingle because I feel like it might be just that rootstock that has a little bit of that Dunkin' grapefruit coming through, but it's totally edible, totally a good tree back there. Yeah. All right, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this sharing of the citrus from the garden, and I will catch y'all next time. Peace.
So good.